Welcome to our channel. Today, we're diving into the eerie world of Raven's Peak. Picture this: a dense forest shrouds the small town, casting long shadows that cloak an abandoned library in an atmosphere of foreboding mystery. Our story begins with Lydia, a thrill-seeking explorer, standing before the weathered stone entrance of this decrepit building. Her breath forms wispy clouds in the chill evening air as she recalls the whispers of ancient tomes, hidden secrets, and supernatural occurrences within these walls. With a sense of determination, Lydia pushes open the heavy oak doors and steps into the dimly lit interior. The musty scent of decay and neglect assaults her senses, while cobwebs cling to shelves that once held volumes of knowledge now lost to the encroaching darkness. Her footsteps echo ominously as she ventures deeper into the abandoned library, her eyes scanning the neglected space. Suddenly, a glint of metallic gold catches her eye, partially hidden by a tattered cloth. Her curiosity piqued, Lydia brushes away the dusty fabric to reveal an ancient, leather-bound tome. The cover is adorned with intricate symbols and arcane markings, radiating a faint sense of power. Reverently, Lydia traces the ornate lettering, her fingers tingling with anticipation. Stay tuned as we uncover the mysteries that lie within Raven's Peak. "What have we here?" she murmured, a crooked grin spreading across her face. Lydia knew she had stumbled upon something special, something that could unlock the secrets of the supernatural that had long fascinated her. Without hesitation, she carefully slipped the tome into her backpack, her heart racing with exhilaration. As Lydia exited the library, she couldn't shake the feeling of unseen eyes watching her every move. The shadows seemed to linger, as if reluctant to release their hold on the abandoned building. Quickening her pace, Lydia made her way back through the dense forest, her mind already racing with possibilities. A week later, Lydia had gathered her trusted circle of thrill-seekers: Marcus, the skeptical historian, and Zoe, the aspiring occultist, to share her extraordinary discovery. They had convened in Zoe's dimly lit apartment, the ancient tome laid out before them on a weathered table. "I found this in the abandoned library," Lydia announced, her voice hushed with reverence. "It's unlike anything I've ever seen. The symbols, the markings, they must be the key to unlocking some incredible power." Marcus, his brow furrowed with concern, ran his fingers over the tome's intricate cover. "Lydia, do you have any idea what you've stumbled upon? This looks like it could be incredibly dangerous. We should be cautious." Zoe, her eyes shining with fascination, leaned in closer, already deciphering the arcane script. "Dangerous? Nonsense, Marcus. This is exactly the kind of opportunity we've been searching for. Just imagine the possibilities, the forbidden knowledge we could uncover." Lydia nodded in agreement, her gaze unwavering. "Zoe's right. This could be the chance of a lifetime. We can't just let it slip through our fingers." Marcus opened his mouth to protest, but the sound of a knock at the door interrupted him. Exchanging a wary glance, the trio turned their attention towards the entrance as Ethan, the town sheriff, stepped into the apartment, his expression stern. "I've been hearing some concerning reports about strange occurrences around town," Ethan announced, his gaze sweeping across the assembled group. "Lights flickering, odd noises, even a few missing persons. Care to enlighten me?" Lydia quickly closed the tome, shielding it from the sheriff's view. "Strange occurrences? I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about, Ethan. We've just been, catching up, that's all." Ethan raised a skeptical brow, his gaze hardening. "Don't play coy with me, Lydia. I know you and your friends have a penchant for finding trouble. If there's something going on in this town, I need to know about it." Marcus cleared his throat, drawing Ethan's attention. "Sheriff, we haven't seen or heard anything out of the ordinary. We're just a group of friends gathering for a book club meeting. Nothing more." Zoe nodded eagerly, her hands fidgeting with the edge of the tome's cover. "Absolutely. Just some casual, intellectual discourse. No need to worry, Ethan." Ethan's eyes narrowed, his skepticism evident, but he seemed to accept their explanation. "All right then. But keep your noses clean, you hear? I'll be keeping an eye on you." As Ethan departed, the trio let out a collective sigh of relief. Lydia immediately turned her attention back to the ancient tome, her excitement barely contained. "We need to figure out what this thing is and what it's capable of," she said, her voice brimming with anticipation. "Zoe, start deciphering those symbols. Marcus, see if you can dig up any information on its origins. We're going to uncover the secrets of this town, whether Ethan likes it or not." Marcus opened his mouth to protest, but the determined glint in Lydia's eyes told him it was a losing battle. Resigned, he nodded and began poring over the tome's pages, his scholarly instincts overriding his better judgment. Zoe, her fingers tracing the intricate markings with reverence, already had her nose buried in an ancient-looking tome of her own, her lips moving silently as she deciphered the arcane script. Lydia leaned back in her chair, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. Raven's Peak was about to experience a thrill like no other, and she couldn't wait to see what secrets the town had been hiding. Raven's Peak had always been an uneventful town, its residents going about their daily lives in a routine rhythm undisturbed by the outside world. But in the days following the group's discovery of the ancient tome and their initial ritual, a palpable unease began to settle over the small community. It started with strange reports from the townsfolk, flickering lights, unexplained noises in the night, and a growing sense of unease that crept into their homes and businesses. Ethan, the town's sheriff, found himself fielding a steady stream of calls about bizarre occurrences, each one more unsettling than the last. "There was a crashing sound coming from the old Sawyer place last night, Mrs. Watkins told Ethan over the phone, her voice trembling. "I looked out the window, and the whole house was lit up like daylight, but there was no one there." Ethan jotted down the details, his brow furrowing. "Did you see anything else? Any unusual activity in the area?" "No, nothing, Mrs. Watkins replied, the sound of her shaky breaths filling the line. "But I can't shake this feeling that there's something wrong. It's like the air itself has changed, you know?" Ethan nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "I understand, ma'am. I'll have a look around the Sawyer place, see if I can't get to the bottom of this." As Ethan hung up the phone, he couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease himself. The reports were becoming more frequent, and the descriptions of the strange occurrences were increasingly unsettling. He knew he needed to get to the root of the problem, but something told him that this wasn't going to be a simple case of vandals or pranksters. Meanwhile, Lydia, Marcus, and Zoe huddled around the ancient tome, poring over the detailed illustrations and cryptic text. Zoe's eyes sparkled with excitement, her fingers tracing the symbols on the weathered pages. "This ritual is far more complex than the first one," she murmured, her brow furrowed in concentration. "The instructions are vague, but I think I can piece together the basic steps." Lydia leaned in, her gaze unwavering. "Then what are we waiting for? Let's do it." Marcus cleared his throat, his expression skeptical. "Are you sure that's wise? The first ritual caused some unsettling phenomena in the town. What if this one unleashes something even more dangerous?" Lydia waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, come on, Marcus. Don't be such a killjoy. We're so close to unlocking the secrets of this book. We can't stop now." Zoe nodded enthusiastically. "Marcus has a point, but think of the power we could harness. The knowledge we could gain. We have to at least try." Marcus sighed, reluctantly conceding. "All right, fine. But we need to be extremely careful. And if things start to get out of hand, we stop immediately, no questions asked." "Agreed?" Lydia and Zoe exchanged a triumphant look, already preparing the necessary materials for the ritual. As they began to chant the ancient words, the air in the room seemed to thicken, and the shadows seemed to shift and dance. Outside, the town of Raven's Peak descended into chaos. Residents reported objects moving on their own, lights flickering, and a sense of unease that permeated every corner of the community. Ethan rushed from one call to the next, his frustration growing as he struggled to make sense of the bizarre incidents. At the Sawyer place, Ethan found the house in complete disarray, furniture overturned and windows shattered. But there was no sign of an intruder, no evidence of a break-in. The only clue was a faint, acrid smell in the air, like something had been burned. As Ethan surveyed the damage, A chill ran down his spine. This was no ordinary vandalism or prank. Something deeply unsettling was happening in Raven's Peak, and he knew he needed to get to the bottom of it. Back at the abandoned library, the group had completed the ritual, their faces flushed with a mixture of exhilaration and trepidation. Zoe's eyes were wide, her expression a blend of awe and unease. "Did you feel that?" she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "The way the air seemed to shift and crackle with energy." Lydia nodded, a grin spreading across her face. "I felt it. It's like the very fabric of reality is bending to our will." Marcus, however, looked troubled, his gaze fixed on the ancient tome. "I have a bad feeling about this. The rituals are clearly having a profound effect on the town. We may have unleashed something we can't control." Lydia scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous, Marcus. We're in complete control. We know what we're doing." But as the three of them gathered their belongings and made their way out of the library, an unseen presence seemed to follow them, its malevolent gaze fixed upon their retreating forms. In the days that followed, the strange occurrences in Raven's Peak only intensified. Residents reported objects levitating, unexplained shadows darting across walls, and a growing sense of dread that permeated their daily lives. Ethan found himself at a loss, unable to make sense of the bizarre incidents. He had called in reinforcements from the state police, but even they were baffled by the nature of the disturbances. "It's like nothing I've ever seen before," one of the officers admitted, shaking his head. "The things people are reporting, it's not possible. At least, not according to any scientific explanation I know of." Ethan gritted his teeth, his frustration mounting. "So what are you saying? That this is all some kind of supernatural phenomenon?" The officer shrugged helplessly. "I don't know what else to make of it, Sheriff. All I know is that the town is in a state of panic, and we need to find a way to restore some semblance of order." Ethan nodded, his mind racing. He knew he needed to get to the bottom of this, to uncover the source of the disturbances. But as he surveyed the growing unrest in Raven's Peak, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was in over his head, that the forces at work were beyond his understanding or control. Raven's Peak had surrendered to the steady encroachment of the supernatural. Strange occurrences plagued the town, as if the very fabric of reality had begun to fray at the edges. Shadows flickered with a life of their own, objects moved without explanation, and time seemed to slip and distort, leaving the residents unsettled and disoriented. Ethan, the town's sheriff, had spent countless hours investigating the bizarre incidents, his brow furrowed with a mixture of concern and growing unease. Reports of missing pets, distorted reflections, and unexplained power outages flooded his office, each new development more unsettling than the last. As he patrolled the streets, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister had taken root in Raven's Peak, something that defied rational explanation. The once quaint town had become a breeding ground for the inexplicable, and Ethan found himself questioning the very nature of the world around him. Across town, Lydia, Marcus, and Zoe huddled around the ancient tome, their expressions a blend of fascination and trepidation. The rituals they had performed had unleashed forces they could scarcely comprehend, and the consequences were becoming increasingly undeniable. "We need to go deeper," Lydia insisted, her eyes alight with a desperate determination. "If we can master these rituals, we can control whatever's happening here." Marcus shook his head, his brow furrowed in skepticism. "Control? Lydia, we've clearly opened a door to something beyond our understanding. The more we push, the more danger we invite." Zoe, her fingers tracing the arcane symbols in the tome, replied, "But don't you see? This is our chance to uncover the true nature of the supernatural. We've been given a glimpse into a world most can only imagine." Tension hung thick in the air as the group debated their next move. Lydia's ambition clashed with Marcus's caution, while Zoe's curiosity pulled her deeper into the forbidden knowledge they had unearthed. Eventually, Lydia's relentless drive won out. "We're doing another ritual. Tonight. And this time, we'll be more prepared." Marcus opened his mouth to protest, but the resolute expression on Lydia's face silenced him. With a resigned sigh, he nodded, knowing that once Lydia had set her mind to something, there was little that could dissuade her. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the group gathered at the ritual site, the gnarled, twisted trees casting sinister shadows across the clearing. Zoe carefully laid out the necessary items, her movements precise and deliberate. Lydia stood at the center, her gaze locked on the ancient tome, while Marcus hovered nearby, his eyes scanning the surroundings with a wary vigilance. The ritual unfolded, the air growing thick with a palpable energy. Zoe's chanting echoed through the clearing, the words foreign and unsettling. Lydia's expression was one of intense focus, her hands tracing the symbols as if guided by an unseen force. Suddenly, the shadows seemed to shift, tendrils of darkness coiling and twisting in the periphery of their vision. Marcus stiffened, his heart pounding in his chest. "Lydia, Zoe, something's wrong." His warning was cut short as the air crackled with a surge of power. The ground trembled, and objects began to levitate, floating in defiance of gravity. Lydia's eyes widened, a triumphant grin spreading across her face. "It's working. We're harnessing the power." But as the ritual reached its climax, the town's streetlights flickered and went dark, plunging the clearing into an eerie, foreboding silence. The shadows thickened, and a sense of dread settled over the group. Ethan, alerted by the power outage, raced to the ritual site, his siren blaring through the night. As he stepped into the clearing, he found Lydia, Marcus, and Zoe frozen in place, their expressions a mix of awe and terror. "What the hell is going on here?" Ethan demanded, his hand reaching for his holstered weapon. Lydia turned to face the sheriff, her eyes wild. "Ethan, you have to understand. We've unlocked something incredible." "Incredible?" Ethan interrupted, his voice laced with skepticism. "This is anything but incredible. I've got reports of strange occurrences all over town, and now you three are out here in the middle of the night, doing God knows what." Marcus stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Ethan, please, just listen to us. We're trying to." But before he could finish, a deafening crack echoed through the clearing, causing everyone to freeze. Slowly, the group turned their gaze toward the source of the sound, their breath catching in their throats. A gaping rift had opened in the air, its edges shimmering with an otherworldly energy. From within the rift, a sense of malevolence radiated, a palpable darkness that seemed to seep into their very souls. Ethan's hand tightened around his gun, his eyes narrowing. "What have you done?" Lydia's expression shifted from triumphant to one of dawning horror. We didn't mean for this. We were just trying to." Her words were cut short as a tendril of shadow lashed out, wrapping around her ankle and yanking her toward the rift. Lydia's scream echoed through the clearing, and the others rushed to her aid, only to be met with a barrage of unearthly forces. Ethan opened fire, his bullets piercing the shadows, but to no avail. The darkness seemed to absorb the gunfire, unaffected by the physical attacks. Marcus dragged Lydia away from the rift, his face etched with terror. "We have to get out of here. This is beyond our control." Zoe, her eyes wild with a mix of fear and fascination, stood transfixed, her hands trembling as she clutched the ancient tome. "The ritual. We have to complete it. We have to seal the rift." Lydia, her clothes torn and her skin marked with scratches, shook her head vehemently. "No more rituals. Can't you see what we've done?" The rift continued to expand, the malevolent energy pulsing and swirling, as if some unseen force was growing in strength. Ethan, realizing the futility of his efforts, grabbed Lydia and Marcus, shouting, "We need to evacuate the town. This is beyond my control now." The group retreated, their footsteps pounding against the ground as they raced away from the ominous rift. Zoe, torn between her desire to uncover the secrets of the rituals and the growing realization of the danger they had unleashed, trailed behind, her eyes fixed on the tome. As they fled, the town's residents emerged from their homes, their faces etched with fear and confusion. Ethan barked orders, trying to maintain some semblance of order, but the panic was palpable. Raven's Peak had fallen victim to forces beyond their comprehension, and the consequences of the group's actions were only just beginning to unfold. The town of Raven's Peak descended into chaos as the supernatural forces unleashed by the group's rituals took hold. Strange occurrences that had once been isolated incidents now plagued the community, shattering the fragile illusion of normalcy. Lydia paced the dimly lit living room of her apartment, her mind racing with a mixture of determination and growing unease. The rituals were supposed to have brought them power, control over the unseen forces they had discovered. But now, the consequences of their actions threatened to spiral out of their grasp entirely. "We've gone too far," Marcus murmured, his brow furrowed as he pored over the ancient tome. "The rituals have unleashed something we can't hope to contain." Zoe sat cross-legged on the floor, her expression a complex blend of fascination and trepidation. "But don't you see? This is the opportunity we've been searching for. To harness powers beyond our understanding. We can't turn back now." Ethan's appearance in the doorway, his face etched with a grave expression, interrupted their discussion. "The reports are getting worse. Residents are exhibiting bizarre behavior, and there have been more disappearances. I need answers, and I need them now." Lydia squared her shoulders, meeting the sheriff's gaze with a hint of defiance. "We're doing what we can to understand what's happening. You have to trust that we're working to fix this." "Trust?" Ethan scoffed, his voice laced with frustration. "You people brought this down on us. I should have shut this operation down the moment I caught wind of it." Marcus raised a hand, attempting to placate the situation. "Ethan, we know how this must look, but you have to believe us. We're as horrified by these events as you are. We're trying to find a way to reverse the effects." Zoe's eyes gleamed with a feverish intensity. "Reverse the effects? Why would we want to do that? This is an opportunity to—" Lydia interrupted her, casting a sharp glance in her direction. "Zoe, enough. We need to focus on containment, not expansion." Turning back to Ethan, she continued, "We'll do whatever it takes to set things right. Just give us time." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he nodded reluctantly. "Time is something we're running out of. The town is on the verge of collapse. If you can't find a solution soon, I'll have no choice but to take matters into my own hands." As the sheriff departed, the group was left in a tense silence, the weight of their responsibilities pressing down on them. Lydia ran a hand through her hair, her expression troubled. "We're in over our heads, aren't we?" she murmured, the bravado in her voice finally faltering. Marcus sighed, closing the ancient tome with a sense of finality. "I'm afraid so. These rituals have unleashed something we don't fully understand. And now the entire town is paying the price for our folly." Zoe's eyes narrowed, a glimmer of defiance in her gaze. "Then we have to keep going. We have to find a way to control this power, to bend it to our will." Lydia shook her head, a hint of resignation in her voice. "Zoe, don't you see? The more we delve into these rituals, the more we risk losing everything. We have to find a way to reverse the effects, no matter the cost." The three of them fell silent, the gravity of their situation weighing heavily on their shoulders. Flashes of memory from the past few days played out in their minds, the initial excitement of the discoveries, the growing sense of unease, the mounting evidence of the supernatural forces they had unleashed. Marcus rose to his feet, his expression resolute. "Then we have no choice but to continue our research, to find a way to undo what we've done. We have to try, for the sake of the town and ourselves." Lydia and Zoe nodded, their own determination renewed by Marcus's words. As they gathered the ancient tome and the notes they had compiled, a sense of shared purpose began to take hold. But the darkness that had taken root in Raven's Peak would not be easily dispelled. As the group delved deeper into the rituals, the supernatural occurrences escalated, defying their attempts at control. Strange phenomena plagued the town, objects levitated, shadows seemed to move of their own accord, and the very fabric of reality began to warp and distort. Residents, once rational and grounded, now exhibited bizarre behaviors, driven by an unseen force that seemed to seep into the very essence of Raven's Peak. Ethan, his frustration and fear mounting, continued to confront the group, demanding answers and action. But each time, he was met with the same refrain: they were trying, they were working to find a solution, they just needed more time. The town descended into a state of panic as the residents turned on one another, their sense of trust and community shattered by the encroaching darkness. Rumors and speculation ran rampant, fueling an atmosphere of suspicion and dread. And then, the disappearances began in earnest. People vanished without a trace, their loved ones left to agonize over their fate. The group knew that they were running out of time, that the malevolent entity they had awakened was growing stronger with each passing day. Lydia, her ambition and recklessness now tempered by the gravity of the situation, pored over the ancient tome, searching desperately for a way to reverse the effects of the rituals. Marcus, his once skeptical worldview shattered, immersed himself in the occult knowledge, driven by a newfound determination to understand the forces they had unleashed. Zoe, however, became increasingly obsessed with the power the rituals promised, her fascination with the dark arts overriding her sense of caution. She argued vehemently against any attempts to undo what they had done, convinced that they were on the cusp of unlocking unimaginable power. Tensions within the group escalated, as the weight of their responsibility and the consequences of their actions threatened to tear them apart. Ethan, caught in the middle of this brewing conflict, struggled to maintain order and find a way to protect the town from the encroaching supernatural forces. As the town of Ravens Peak descended into chaos, the group knew that they had to act quickly, before the malevolent entity they had awakened consumed them all. The group convened in the dilapidated attic of the abandoned library, the ancient tome of rituals spread out before them. Lydia paced the cramped space, her mind racing as she tried to make sense of the events unfolding in Ravens Peak. "We have to do it, no matter the cost," she declared, her voice resolute. "This entity, this darkness, is only going to grow stronger if we don't stop it now." Marcus shifted uncomfortably, his brow furrowed in deep contemplation. "But the last ritual nearly tore the town apart. We're playing with forces beyond our control, Lydia. Are you sure we're ready for this?" Zoe ran her fingers along the aged pages, her eyes alight with a mixture of fascination and trepidation. "The tome speaks of a final ritual, one that could seal away the entity for good. But the consequences..." She trailed off, unwilling to voice her darkest fears. Ethan, the town sheriff, stood by the window, his gaze fixed on the swirling shadows outside. "This thing has already taken too much from us. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to protect my town, even if it means working with you." His words were laced with a grudging acceptance of their newfound alliance. Lydia paused, her breathing measured as she considered the gravity of their situation. "We all have our reasons for being here, our own demons to face. But this is bigger than any of us. We have to confront the darkness, no matter the cost." The group fell silent, each lost in their own thoughts, the weight of their decisions bearing down on them. Lydia's eyes narrowed as she made a crucial discovery within the tome's pages. "I think I know the key to performing the final ritual, but it's going to require a sacrifice. We'll have to dig deeper within ourselves than ever before." Tension filled the air as the group grappled with the implications. Flashes of their past, the moments that had shaped them, surfaced unbidden. Lydia's reckless youth, Marcus's academic detachment, Zoe's growing obsession, Ethan's rigid determination, each character's defining experiences now seemed to hold the key to their survival. Gathering the necessary supplies, the group prepared for the ritual, their movements tense and deliberate. Ethan remained on high alert, his senses heightened as he scanned the town for any signs of the entity's activity. As night fell, the town of Ravens Peak descended into chaos. Residents reported strange sightings, their panic palpable. Shadows seemed to writhe and undulate, and the very fabric of reality appeared to warp and distort. Ethan rushed to coordinate the town's response, struggling to maintain order amidst the growing pandemonium. Meanwhile, the group huddled in the attic, steeling themselves for the task ahead. Lydia's brow was furrowed in concentration as she meticulously followed the ritual's instructions, her hands steady despite the turmoil outside. Zoe's eyes shone with a mixture of trepidation and resolve. "We have to be prepared for anything. This ritual could unlock powers beyond our understanding." Marcus nodded, his own fears tempered by a newfound determination. "Then we must be ready to face whatever comes. For the sake of Ravens Peak, and for ourselves." The group began the ritual, their voices rising and falling in a haunting chant. The air grew thick with tension, and the shadows in the room seemed to pulse with an unseen energy. Ethan, having managed to secure the town for the moment, hurried to join them, his presence a steadying influence amidst the chaos. As the ritual reached its climax, the group was assailed by a barrage of memories, each character confronting the darkest moments of their pasts. Lydia saw herself as a reckless youth, her thirst for adventure leading her down a path of destruction. Marcus relived the heartbreak of losing his mentor, the mentor who had instilled in him a deep skepticism towards the supernatural. Zoe was haunted by the trauma of her parents' sudden disappearance, the event that had fueled her obsession with the occult. Ethan, too, was not spared. He saw himself as a young deputy, struggling to uphold the law in the face of a town that seemed to harbor its own dark secrets. The weight of his failures, the decisions he had made that led to tragedy, now threatened to overwhelm him. The entity, sensing the group's vulnerability, began to manifest, its presence a palpable force that pressed against their minds. Shadows coalesced and flickered, and the very air seemed to crackle with an unearthly energy. Lydia, her face etched with determination, reached out to her companions. "We can't let our past define us. We must face this together, or we won't survive." With a collective effort, the group pushed back against the entity, channeling their experiences into a well of strength and resilience. Marcus's rational mind provided the clarity they needed, Zoe's occult knowledge offered a glimmer of understanding, and Ethan's unwavering sense of duty lent them the courage to endure. The ritual reached a crescendo, the very foundations of the town shaking with the intensity of the supernatural forces at work. Ethan raced to evacuate the remaining residents, his voice cutting through the chaos as he urged them to seek shelter. Lydia, Marcus, and Zoe remained, their focus unwavering as they navigated the blurred boundaries between reality and the otherworldly. The entity, sensing its impending defeat, lashed out with a fury that threatened to tear the town asunder. In a moment of ultimate sacrifice, the group found the strength to complete the ritual, sealing away the malevolent force, but not without a devastating cost. As the final chant echoed through the town, the very fabric of Raven's Peak shifted, its residents left to grapple with the aftermath of the group's harrowing confrontation. The town fell silent, the air thick with a sense of unease and the lingering presence of the supernatural. Ethan, bruised and weary, returned to the attic, his eyes searching the faces of his unlikely allies. "It's done, then?" Lydia, Marcus, and Zoe stood, their expressions somber, their bond forged in the crucible of their shared ordeal. "For now," Lydia replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But the darkness will never truly be vanquished. Not as long as we carry the weight of our pasts." The group exited the attic, each lost in their own reflections, their steps heavy with the knowledge that the battle for Raven's Peak was far from over. The air in Raven's Peak crackled with an electric charge as the group prepared for the final ritual. Lydia pored over the ancient tome, her brow furrowed with concentration, while Marcus and Zoe gathered the necessary supplies, herbs, candles, and a strange array of objects imbued with otherworldly energy. Ethan, the town's sheriff, stood watch, his jaw set with grim determination. The entity that had been unleashed by their previous rituals lurked in the shadows, its presence palpable and menacing. The group could feel its malevolent gaze upon them, daring them to proceed with their plan. But they had no choice. The fate of Raven's Peak hung in the balance. As the group convened at the ritual site, a thick fog rolled in, obscuring the already eerie surroundings. Lydia took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly, before addressing the others. "We all know the risks," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But we have to do this. For the town, for ourselves, for the future." Marcus nodded, his face set in a resolute expression. "I never thought I'd be standing here, ready to confront the unknown. But after everything we've witnessed, I know we have no other choice." Zoe's eyes gleamed with a mixture of fear and determination. "The ritual is complex, but I believe we can channel the necessary energies to seal away the entity. We just have to be prepared for the consequences." Ethan cleared his throat, his gaze sweeping over the group. "I'm still not sure I understand any of this. supernatural nonsense. But if it's the only way to protect the people of this town, then I'm in. With a nod, Lydia began to recite the ancient words, her voice resonating through the fog. The others joined her, their voices rising and falling in a haunting cadence. As the ritual progressed, the air grew thick with a palpable energy, the very fabric of reality seeming to shift and warp around them. Suddenly, a deafening crack of thunder echoed through the forest, causing the group to flinch. The entity materialized before them, its form shifting and undulating, a cacophony of inhuman screeches and whispers assaulting their senses. Lydia steeled herself, refusing to be cowed by the creature's malevolent presence. "We won't let you win," she growled, her voice barely recognizable. "This ends now." The group redoubled their efforts, pouring their collective will into the ritual. Zoe's hands moved in intricate patterns, her lips forming arcane syllables, while Marcus and Ethan provided a steady, grounding presence, anchoring the group amidst the chaos. As the ritual reached its climax, the entity lashed out, its tendrils of darkness snaking towards the group. Lydia, her eyes wild with determination, stepped forward, shielding her friends with her own body. The creature's onslaught slammed into her, and she let out a scream of anguish, her knees buckling. "Lydia!" Marcus cried, rushing to her side, but Lydia held up a shaking hand. "Keep going," she gasped, her voice hoarse. I can hold it back." Zoe's eyes widened with understanding, and she nodded grimly, renewing her focus on the ritual. Ethan, his jaw clenched, took up a position beside Lydia, his service weapon drawn, ready to defend her at all costs. The entity's assault intensified, its tendrils lashing out with increasing ferocity. Lydia gritted her teeth, summoning every ounce of her remaining strength to withstand the onslaught. Waves of energy rippled through the air, sending the others staggering, but still they persisted. As the ritual reached its climactic moments, the very ground beneath their feet began to tremble, the shadows deepening and twisting. Zoe's voice rose in a desperate, guttural chant, and Marcus and Ethan joined her, their voices mingling in a desperate plea to the unseen forces that governed this twisted reality. With a final, earth-shattering surge of power, the ritual reached its culmination. A blinding light erupted from the center of the ritual circle, engulfing the entity in a maelstrom of otherworldly energy. The creature let out a terrible, agonizing wail, its form unraveling and disintegrating before their eyes. As the light faded, the group stood, battered and bruised, but triumphant. Lydia lay on the ground, her breathing shallow, a haunted look in her eyes. Ethan knelt beside her, his expression a mix of relief and concern. "It's over," Lydia whispered, her voice barely audible. "We did it." Marcus and Zoe approached, their faces etched with exhaustion and a profound sense of unease. The victory felt hollow, tinged with the weight of the sacrifices they had made. "At what cost?" Marcus murmured, his gaze sweeping over the devastated landscape. Zoe placed a hand on his shoulder, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "We had no choice. The darkness had to be stopped, no matter the price." Ethan helped Lydia to her feet, steadying her as she swayed. "Come on," he said gruffly. "Let's get back to town and see what's left." As the group made their way back through the dense fog, a sense of dread and uncertainty hung heavy in the air. Raven's Peak had been forever changed by the events that had unfolded, and the repercussions would be felt for years to come. The once vibrant town lay in ruins, its residents huddled in makeshift shelters, their eyes haunted and their spirits broken. Lydia surveyed the devastation, her heart sinking with the weight of her guilt. "This is all my fault," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I should have listened to you, Marcus. I was so focused on uncovering the secrets, I never considered the true cost." Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression unreadable. "We all made choices, Lydia. None of us could have known the extent of the darkness we were dealing with. What matters now is that we found a way to stop it, even if the price was high." Zoe stepped forward, her gaze unfocused, as if she were still processing the events. "The ritual worked, but the entity. It was only a piece of a much larger, ancient evil. I fear that this is not the end, merely a temporary respite." Ethan cleared his throat, his expression grim. Then we'll be ready for it. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. This town isn't going down without a fight. The group stood in silence, their eyes scanning the devastated landscape, a lingering sense of unease and the possibility of future supernatural disturbances weighing heavily on their minds. Raven's Peak had been forever changed, and they knew that the darkness they had confronted was far from vanquished. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the broken town, the group steeled themselves for the challenges that lay ahead. They had faced the unknown and emerged victorious, but the true test was only just beginning. Thank you for joining us on this eerie adventure into Raven's Peak. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, like, push the bell icon for notifications, and share this video with your friends. Stay tuned for more thrilling tales and mysterious explorations. Until next time, keep your curiosity alive.